Welcome, Acers, to the Ace RPG Weekly Role-Playing Game Podcast. And I'm Mason Emerson, your host. I'm the founder of the Ace RPG Clubs, and I am hoping that you are having a wonderful time out there with your games. I'm hoping that you guys are creating some great stories and that you're creating even greater friends, because it's the friend group that really matters. That's how we prevent ourselves from doing the unalive, because we want to be alive and be friends with each other and be able to have the love and support of our friends when we go through hard times. That said, I want to move into this week in role playing, as it were. I was able to participate in a couple of games this week, and by the way, I'm sorry about the adjustments, but I'm hoping the microphone position, which makes me on camera look like every other podcaster that I've seen. So I guess that makes me cool. Hey, but anyway, I was able to participate in a couple different RPGs. One of them was my Thursday RPG. Well, first going back to the Tuesday RPG, we were on a quest to go and use that sort of undead slaying that we were using just as a MacGuffin for the game that we were using. But I didn't play in that one because I was also off helping other people create characters and things like that, and kind of coaching some people. So I actually didn't play my defender. My defender, I gave him a voice kind of like this. I kind of patterned him off of a less depressed version of Marvin, the paranoid android from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because he was a tall walking suit of armor. So that was the defender character that I was playing in the previous parts of it, but I went ahead and I just let those go. So anyway, I was able to play on Thursday. I was able to run for my friends on my every other Thursday online group, and we're playing East Texas University. And in this one, the combat that we were in kind of took the whole hour, or the whole 3 hours, but we also kind of started late, so I guess it was only really 2 hours of play, because we do have the chit chat, which is okay. The chit chat is part of role playing games. You're seeing your friends, you're chatting it up, you're talking about things that have happened the last couple of weeks, you're talking about things that are interesting, things that are germane to the moment. And then we went ahead and played anyway. And so it did take a couple hours for the combat, but it's better than a 4 hour combat. We were able to actually resolve it in the 2 hours that we did play. And one of our guys couldn't get on until he had his twins down to bed anyway. So no shade, no shame, no problems. Anyway, that game was great. We kept the action going. They found a few things that are going to be pieces that they need in order to help the things go forward. They learned about some other pieces. I'm not going to go into too many details on it, because some of you might play that East Texas University Degrees of Horror campaign, and many of my friends have. Now, that said, let's talk about yesterday, and that actually leads into today's topic. So if you'll excuse me while I do this real quick, I'm going to pause. Okay, I'm back, and this actually, like I said, leads into my topic for today. So I was playing I'm playing a character named Ralph DRC. And I went for Ralph because, I mean, hey, it's a pretty generic English name, and it's not one of the cool fantasy flip out names or anything like that. Like, we have a character in the name Debrickashaw, but I mean, that's actually a real name of a real person who was a football player apparently, but still, it sounds kind of fantasy like and stuff like that. I went with Ralph. And I actually had an Uncle Ralph. So, Ralph's not a bad name. But anyway, my character, I'm playing a Ranger Rogue, a Gloomstalker Ranger Rogue. Sorry about the mic bump. Anyway, I'm playing this Gloomstalker Ranger Rogue in a D&D game. And we were down in this room where they were doing some torturous and horrible things to my new adopted child that I want to take care of, because my character's twin sister got murdered in front of him, and there was nothing he could do about it. So he's trying to do something at least to save this child. And they they've finished doing this horrible, horrible thing to this child, and I've just been wanting to kill him, but my teammates are like, just hold on, we got to try and figure this out. So they created they loosed a being who was going to go through the whole tower that we were in and cause some havoc and clean house. And in the meantime, we were up against these other beings, and these other beings had some racial abilities. Because what happened was, first I step around the corner. The guy who's trying to attack my guy, who's right next to my guy, I pull my rogue number out and my Gloomstalker ranges, so I get 3 shots to start with, and because I decided to go for archery as my weapon. So I take my 3 shots, shunk, 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 miss the first one, nail the second 2, and I do like 40 something points of damage because of my sneak attack and all that other kind of stuff. And then one of his guys steps around the corner, does Tasha's Hideous Laughter and something else on me, and because of a racial ability, I basically have to make a Wisdom 19 save in order to be able to act again. I am basically frozen in place. By which point they come along, they stun me, drop me to the ground, send me prone, and then they stab the crap out of me, and I go to 0 hit points. So I was very much in danger of dying, but then my dice finally started working with me, and I made the first save, and then I was healed for some hit points. But the point is about this topic that I want to cover today is character death. Because, first of all, part of the reason why we play role-playing games is it's because it's a safe laboratory for us to experiment with things that we might not actually experiment with our real bodies. Like jumping over cliffs, or hurling yourself full speed into a wall of spikes, or things like that. We probably wouldn't want to do that. And we don't necessarily want the ouchies. But we have these imaginary characters in this imaginary world, in this imaginary place that can do these things. You might not personally run into a blazing inferno building to pick up Granny on the 3rd floor balcony, as the example I've used frequently, and bring her down to safety. No, you're probably going to let the firefighters do that. But if you're playing a superhero character or a heroic character, your character's going to want to take that risk. So that's part of what a role-playing game is about. It's about taking risks. It's about being out there and saying, okay, I am going to take my character, and they are going to rush into that blazing inferno. And I'm going to roll dice to determine if I can dodge out of the falling debris of flaming rafters and things like that, and make it up treacherous stairs. And it sounds like actually a pretty cool adventure, doesn't it? But that's because you're doing something right there, first and foremost. We're taking risks. We don't play role-playing games to have our characters die of old age, per se. Maybe they do. Maybe they survive all their adventures of their youth, of their misspent youth, and they make it to a point where they can die of old age. And we could tell that story. But that's not going to be the story of the adventure that we're playing. Because we play adventures. We're playing characters who are adventurers. And that means that when we're playing characters who are adventurers, they are going to do adventurous things. That's why we have characters who have fighting abilities. That's why we have characters who have talking abilities to be able to negotiate, and that are, characters like Face or a lawyer or something like that. These characters all know things that we as their players don't even know. And so they're going to do things that we as players might not do and might not want them to do, because we want to try and preserve the character, to make it to level 65 or whatever. But no, we need to make sure that we are keeping our characters not alive, but having them help keep us alive in our hearts, telling an action story. So we have that first and foremost. And I'm going to check my notes here. And that's the other thing, is that you want to do the foolish thing. You want to jump in with both feet. And that's the way I play my characters when I play. The few seldom times that I do get to play, I try to play my character both feet. Just jumping right over that cliff to land in water at the bottom, or maybe on the rocks. I don't know. I'll roll the dice. I'll find out. But last night, when Ralph Darcy fell down, I was getting my secondary character, who's a knowledge domain cleric. I was getting him ready to throw right in. And he would have actually filled one thing they both have in common is they're both investigators. And I really, really like that. And actually, my knowledge domain cleric is actually one of my favorite characters that I've ever made. So, what would happen though if he died? I admit, most RPGs are character safe. Most RPGs are designed to keep your character alive as many hits as it takes. And I heard an interesting theory last night about challenge ratings, because that's kind of how the game master he's currently running right now is kind of using challenge ratings to put out what we're going to be doing and what we're going to be fighting. And what happened though is the other game master who ran the previous game that we ran, the one where we went from levels 1 to 20, I mentioned that before. He put out there that he just takes the villain or the antagonist, the monster we're going to fight, and figures how many hits would it take to take this thing down. And then he flips it around and says, how many hits, basically how many hits will it take for the players to take this character down, and basically totals up all the hit points of the party and tries to keep them about equal. Like the number of hits the thing takes to take down versus the number of hit points of the party. And I think that's a pretty good and wise way of doing it. I am, of course, as you guys know, and if you've been following me a while, I am a fan of let's just go ahead and make the world make sense. So if they're walking into a big cavern to steal a whole bunch of treasure and there's a pair of mating basilisks in there, guess what? They're going to have to deal with a pair of mating basilisks. Or if it's a pair of mating tarasks or taraskus, I don't know exactly how you guys choose to pronounce it, but I say tarask. But anyway, if they might find a mated pair of tarask, then they are going to have a big fight on their hands, and chances are they're not going to get out. But that's D&D. Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds has also kind of you'll hear of the death spiral, because once you actually take an actual wound, all of your rolls are being made at a -1. Take 2 wounds, you're making rolls at -2. Take 3 wounds, you're making rolls at -3, and then 4th wound, you're getting incapacitated. Or maybe something hits you with a gas attack, and you take 1 point of fatigue. Now you're rolling at a -1. 2 points of fatigue, you're rolling at a -2. Incapacitated. So, and if something really bad hits you, you got 3 wounds and you got 2 points of fatigue, and you are doing every roll at a -5 before one more hit of any other kind incapacitates you. And that's the thing, is that my character went down incapacitated, but he wasn't dead, and I was rolling death saves, and I actually was making those death saves. So that proves my point, though. Most RPGs are designed to be character safe. You may have a character who goes down really low, but most of the rules of RPGs are designed to keep characters alive. But if that risk of death for that character wasn't there, then you might not find it as interesting. Because sometimes characters die. Sometimes you're done playing that character. Sometimes you realize that you might need to even leave that group. Sometimes, though, the dice speak. Because there have been times where I'm rolling a fair die, and I roll and I roll and I roll, and I can't get anything higher than a 6. And my character's dying. And maybe does die. But that's okay. Because it's not me. I didn't die. I've put some of my emotions and thoughts into this character, yes. But this character is not me. This character gives me a chance to explore something that might be foolhardy, but might be really cool and fun. I might never jump out of a perfectly good airplane and skydive. I might never do it. As a matter of fact, I have one friend whose parachutes failed to open at the right time. Well, his main parachute didn't open at all, and his reserve chute failed just a little too too close to the ground, and he lost some of his memories, lost his memories of his best friend. And I've seen ouchy things, but at the same time, if I'm playing Titan Effect, you can bet your sweet bippy that I'm going to try and jump out of a plane, especially if I'm playing a telekinetic, where I can just jump out of the plane and slow myself down almost all the way to the ground. So that's where it's okay to let our characters die. We can also coordinate and plan a death. And I've got a little story that I'm going to steal from another person that I very much respect in a few moments to explain how you can plan character deaths. How we deal with the death, though, is just as important. As a matter of fact, it's the most important thing. Because if we scream and shout and stomp around, that's not a healthy way of dealing with that death. But if we are just like, you know what? This was fun character to play, but they're dead now. I'm going to go on and make a new character. Then we're making a new character. Now, if you're playing in Savage Worlds and you're used to making characters by that point, you can probably create your new character in about 15-20 minutes and be back in the action. I mean, going back to how some systems are designed for character death, protection, you can go all the way to things like Toon or the Harvey's Heroes game that I run. Basically, even if you are full-on incapacitated or even crushed by something, you're a cartoon. You come back to life. You come back in after about 2 or 3 rounds of action and you're ready to go again. So there are things where death is not an actual thing. But there are things where deaths are natural in that world. And not only are they natural, but if you guys react well to them, then you could have an even more deep and meaningful experience with the story that you're telling. So, as an example, there is a story told by on one of the podcasts I used to listen to about a character whose it was him and the girl that was playing his fiance, and his character and the fiance of the guy's character, and she gets murdered by slavers because she fights back, so they murder her just from cheap shot from behind. And instead of just getting angry about it or anything, the guy or the player who was playing the fiance stops and says, "Okay, let's run with this." And so the guy who was playing the intended groom, he full on just, that becomes the quest of the party now. They had another quest that they were originally going to go on, and the slavers were supposed to be just a random encounter. But he is now dedicated to finding the slaver, the head slaver who got away, finding that head slaver and cutting the skin off of his body in 1-inch strips. I mean, that's what he tells the dungeon master. He tells the game master, "I'm going to just really torturously put this guy to death." And the whole time, there's also character thing going on there, where there's a holy character who's trying to convince him, "No, you can't do this. This is something even more evil than what he did to you. He killed one person, but you flaying him to death, that's going to be one of the worst things you could possibly do. You're going to fall to the dark side kind of thing if you do that." And then when they finally catch up to him, he's in a room, and they all walk out. They're like, he's just gonna cut pieces off this bad guy until he dies. And they hear a shriek and a scream, and then the former intended groom, he walks out of the room, and they're still hearing screaming coming from inside. They go in there expecting to see at least the job started, and they see that the former groom had taken his knife and stabbed it in his hand and pinned it to the table. So but it led to a great story and a great character arc too, as he went from happy to, "I'm going to get revenge, I'm going to kill them all," to, "Okay, I'm okay with my life now that I've at least caused him some harm, some pain." So that's there. But the one I want to reference here is the one from Play Dirty. Now, in Play Dirty, the amazing game master John Wick, who has been around a long time before the movies. Anyway, but John Wick, I highly recommend getting both of his books, Play Dirty and Play Dirty 2, or Play Dirtier. And those two books are just absolutely amazing. They have some articles that he wrote for, like, I think Dragon Magazine or things like that, or Pyramid Magazine. But these articles, they all kind of work together, and John Wick did some amazing stuff. He's one of the main creative writers behind the original Seventh Sea, which I have, but it's in the other room. Anyway, he then he talked about how he was running Champions back in Wisconsin, where he was going to school. And when he was running Champions there, there was this guy who was this amazing superhero, and he worked for Universal Superheroes, and the player, for some reason, wanted to either retire the character or just walk away. And then he and John got this idea of, well, why don't we kill him? That could lead to some fun story. So he goes in. Everybody knows who this hero is, Mr. Fantastic or something like that. But anyway, he runs around his neighborhood every morning, and everybody knows him. All the neighborhood kids know him and love him, and he greets them, and just great. Well, he goes into a convenience store, and a couple of young hoodlums are there, robbing the convenience store, and one of them shoots the superhero in the head and kills him. And this now leads to all the other superheroes trying to find what's going on with this murder. And it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, because it turns out that the main villain of the story had hired these two kids just to kill the captain. And then turns out the villain is their boss, who actually owns United Superheroes and has been lobbying for them, and is actually a super villain in his own right, in that he's actually smarter than everybody, and he plays chess with them as pieces. And it's just this great story. I'm like, one of the things he did was he got a superheroine to accidental to her, as far as she was concerned, they accidentally killed her, or it was maybe it was for a Fighting McFighters from Fighter Town, but it was a case where the villain had set the bad guy up, or had set the good guy up to tell him that the bad guy could be stopped with a certain substance, but in turn the certain substance killed the bad guy, and now there's a death on this person's hands, and they go to prison for it. But of course, the arch villain, he's like, oh, I'm going to use my lawyers and get you out as quick as I can, because I'm the one who lobbied for the superheroes to be able to be superheroes. And then, in another instance, he has a girl get knocked out by a villain, and dropped through the skylight of the fancy restaurant where she was having dinner with her grandmother, and her family, and that none of them know that she is a superhero. And then the superheroine, and her grandmother hates superheroes because her grandfather had been a cop, and he earned his living honestly, and he didn't go in for any of that vigilante stuff. And even though they're legal, she still sees superheroes as vigilantes. And that's when, now, the superheroine, she's fighting this guy. He hits her with a stun ray. She falls in through the skylight, hits on the table of grandma and the family, and the mask gets pulled off, and it's granddaughter. And the grandmother has a heart attack and dies. And the heroine hangs up her cowl the next day. She quits. But she goes on to become a lawyer. And when they finally do catch the bad guy, well, first of all, this is the kind of the point here. First of all, they hold a funeral, actually, for this bad guy, or for the superhero. Going back to the superhero who got murdered, they hold a funeral for him, and they actually have all the players who've played with this character over time, even players that they were bringing back, they bring them in, and they all in character of their retired superhero or whatever, give a eulogy for this fallen superhero, and they dedicate themselves to finding the bad guy. And when they finally do find the bad guy and arrest him, and he's been brought down and he can't cause any more problems, the lawyer who prosecutes against him is the player who had her character give her grandmother a heart attack. And it's just, the great story happened because they ran with the character death. Now, some cases I've heard of a planned character death getting screwed up. But one thing that I want to say to you as a game master is I would suggest and challenge you to let your dying character on the table, even if they've been unconscious and out of action for a while. Let them come to and have some last words. Say something amazing, something arousing, something special that the players will remember. And then when the players remember it, of course their characters will remember it, they too become more galvanized and more of a cohesive unit that can face more things together. So just remember, it ends with making a new character. And sometimes that character just can come in. And the final point also on this is that if they make a new character, don't penalize the character. That used to be in some of the older versions of Savage Worlds. You'd like go down a level or an advance or something like that. But just give them a character that's the same number of advances. Now, if there's somebody starting late, then that they started late in the game and they can have a character who's a step or two behind the others. But regardless, we want to be able to have fun with our friends. And we want to be able to do that and use role-playing games as a laboratory for what happens how do we feel when we shoot somebody? How do we feel when we are giving that great rousing speech to perk everybody up just before the battle hits? How do we feel when we're on that battlefield? How do we feel if we die? But this is all in a lab. It's all safe. It's all contained. And now that you've recreated your character, you can work with your game master to bring them in at a dramatically appropriate time. So that's all I have for this week. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts and ramblings on character death, and I'm really grateful that you joined me. If you will just please like, subscribe, send this video to your friends. If they have any questions, my contact information is available to anyone there in my YouTube channel. And I've really enjoyed having you here. Thank you so much for coming. And remember, I love you. The world is a better place because you're in it. And I want to see you at my table. Have a good one.